Welcome everyone to my first photography post-processing tutorial video. On this video we're going to work on this sunset image, and here you can see on the left the before and on the right that after image that we're going to accomplish. You can tell on the right how the sky is very different. We brought up all this orange glow, so let's look again at the before and after in a closer way. And let's get started on how to do this, how to post-process this image in Lightroom. The first adjustment that we're going to do is we're going to go to the lens correction panel under the develop module. So we click remove chromatic aberration and enable profile correction. So as you can see, Lightroom detects my lens make and model, and it's the first adjustment that I like to do. Second thing we're going to work on is on cropping the image. So for this image, we have on the left, bottom left, we have this dark foreground that really doesn't add interest to the image. I want to focus on the sky. So I want to adjust the aspect to 16:9. And in that way, my overall image reduces in size. And now I'm just going to drag the image to fit on the top part of my frame. In this way, I can remove most of the foreground and focus on the sky. With L, I can turn off the background so that I can see how the image looks like. And this is a lot better. This is how I want the image to look like. Now we're going to work on removing dust spots. So for that, I use the spot removal tool. With your mouse, you can scroll up to increase the size of the brush, and you're basically are going to click where you see these spots. So Lightroom is looking for similar pixels, and they are being replaced to hide that spot that you had. If you click on visualize spots, this is going to help you to faster and easier identify any other spots in the image. And same thing, you just click on them, you adjust the brush to the size that you want. And here you can spend as much time as you want, depending on how detailed you want to be on your final image. Okay, now we're going to start on the basic panel. So the first thing that I want to do is adjust the temperature. If you scroll to the left, if you drag to the left, the image you see is cooler, to the right is warmer. So since this is a sunset image, I want to adjust to the right. Around 1700, I think that's a good value, and it adds good warmth to the image. So you can see the before and after. If you double click, the marker goes to where it was originally. Tint, if you drag to the left, the image is going to be greener. If you drag to the right, the image is going to be redder. In this case, I'm just going to leave it as 0. I think how the camera did it is good enough. Okay, now I skip exposure and contrast, and I want to work on my highlights. So first thing, I want you to look at the histogram here. When you put your mouse on that little arrow, let's say to the left, you can see if there's any shadow clipping. If you go all the way to the right, you can see if there's any highlight clipping. And in this case, you can see how there are some pixels, let's say in the image, especially where the sun was, that they look red. That means that they have been clipped. When I took the picture, remember again, always shoot raw. That's very important. When I shoot the picture, I always try to expose to the right. So I try to do it in a way that most of the light is captured right before getting clipping. If you look at the highlights, this is very, very important when you're taking a sunset image. Just by dragging all the way to the left, look how all the color comes up on the clouds. Very, very different than the original image. This is very important. How much you reduce the highlights is up to you. I'm going to do around -80. And again, if I double click and can see what it was, the original what the original value was. -80, -81, I think is a good value for this image. Next thing I work on are the shadows. So similar than the highlights, what I want to do is bring up the shadows. So I reduce the highlights, I bring up the shadows. Remember that the image was exposed to the right in the histogram. So I'm just increasing the shadows to a level that I want to bring up the detail on the darker areas. For this case, that background area, I don't want a lot of detail. I like the contrast of that dark foreground with the background. So I'm going to leave it around 30. Then we can work on the whites and the blacks clipping. By holding Alt and then dragging the marker on the bar, you can start seeing how some pixels turn white. That's showing me where clipping is happening. If I go again to the histogram, I can see that there is no more clipping. And now I'm going to do the same for the blacks. I hold the Alt key and I drag to the left, and I can start seeing all these pixels that are turning black. They mean that they're being clipped. So yeah, I just want to make them a little bit darker. I am okay for this image to have some area that's darker. I think that's good. Now we're going to, before I use exposure and contrast, those are going to be the last bars that we're going to play with in the basic panel. Now I'm going to work on the presence panel. I'm not going to use the texture for this image. I'm just going to go ahead and start working on clarity. So clarity is kind of a way of working on the contrast of your image. If you go all the way to the right, you can see how there is more definition in the clouds and the mountains. You don't want to do it too much. The image is going to look a little bit unnatural. You can see here how the clouds are better defined. Darker areas are more dark, brighter areas are brighter. So the mountains look a little bit unnatural. So I recommend usually doing like around no more than 10. This is going to depend on your image. Again, you can always double click to see how the original setting was, so that the marker goes back to that setting, the original setting, or yep, I'm just going to leave it like around 7. I think that's good. Dehaze, it's also a way of bringing up contrast and more definition on your image. Again, I don't recommend doing this a lot because the image is going to look a little bit unnatural. So like around plus 16, I think is a good value. Again, double clicking there to go back to the original setting on the marker and compare how it looks like. Next thing we're going to work on is vibrance. If you push the vibrance all the way to the right, you can see how the sky starts changing. The blues look unnatural. The oranges are extremely strong. So your image looks weird. You don't want that, right? So double click to go back to the original setting. Again, drag to the right. And what I like to do is to leave it, I like to leave it at a value where right before it starts looking strange, so that the colors pop, but it doesn't look very, very natural. Since this sunset was so great, and it was so colorful, I really don't need to do a lot. I'm just going to leave it around plus 30. I think that's pretty good. For saturation, this is, let's say, a very rough adjustment in the image compared to vibrance. I usually just like to bring it up a little bit, like plus 2. I think that's good enough. You can see in the image already how this orange glow, it's popping up a lot. Okay, so last thing we're going to do on the basic panel. Let's go ahead and do these exposure and contrast adjustments. That's the last thing that I like to do. And first I'm going to work on the contrast. So contrast is, again, it's like a very rough adjustment for your image. You can see how everything changes. The dark areas are darker, the bright areas are brighter. That's what you do when you increase your contrast. So around plus 9, I think is a good value for this image. And then I like to play with exposure, just bring up a little bit more exposure in the image. I think around plus 0.2, plus 0.1, something around there, just a little bit, so the image is a little bit brighter. You can see how the histogram now is well balanced. It looks good, and the image looks nice. I don't want the image to be too bright. Again, this is a sunset image, so I think that looks good. Next thing we're going to work on is the HSL and color panel. We're going to adjust the saturation, and here this is very important. In this section, in this panel, we can adjust the saturation of specific colors. By clicking on this tool, you can go to the image and then select the specific color that you want to adjust. So let me do it again. I think in this case, I'm going to work on the oranges. And you can see if I just leave the mouse on the orange clouds and I press the up key or the bottom key, the up or down key, you can see how the red and the orange on this bar are being adjusted. You can also do it manually. I'm just going to write a value plus 10 for the oranges. I think red plus 2 is fine. And if you want to do these adjustments faster, I think if you leave the shift key, if you hold the shift key and then you press up or down, that's going to move the markers quickly. Now for luminance, what we do here is we are adjusting colors that we want to be lighter or darker. So again, if you click on the tool, on that indicator tool, you can go and select the color that you want to adjust. I put the mouse on top of the orange of the cloud, and I just then use the top and down key to increase or decrease the luminance of a specific color. Same here with this kind of yellow area on the sunset, I can do the same adjustment. And again, I want the image to be a little bit darker just to have like a nicer mood of a sunset. You can see how the orange, if I go up or down, how it changes in my image. So like around -5 is okay. And the last thing that I do, this is up to you. You don't have to do it. I like sometimes to play with the hue of the image. So same thing, I click on the tool, then I go and put the mouse on the area where I want to adjust the colors, and then I go up and down. And it's going to, in this specific way, either increase the red and orange look of the image or decrease it. So around -4, -1, I think looks good. And then I'm going to work on the detail panel. And the detail panel is where you adjust the sharpening of your image. This is very important. But first I want to decide where I'm going to apply the sharpening. In other words, which pixels we're going to adjust. When you use the masking bar there, by pressing the Alt key and then dragging to the right, you see where the sharpening is going to be applied. So everything that's white is where it's being applied. Everything that it's dark is where it's not being applied. I just want some of the edges of the clouds and the mountain to be sharp, right? I don't want the clouds to lose that smooth look of the sunset. So again, hold the Alt key and move the bar, and you can see where the sharpening is going to be applied. A good value here to use for sharpening, I usually like to use 70. If you want to really see how this is affecting your image, I recommend doing the 1:1 ratio that you just selected there, then apply the value that you have, 70, and you can see how your image starts looking a little bit sharper. And this also means that there's some noise that's going to come up from the image. So now we're going to use the luminance bar. And I think 30 is a good value usually to balance how much you increase noise by doing the sharpening. So 70-30 I think it's a good balance. And again, you can see how it adjusts there. The last thing that I like to do for this color image is to do the noise reduction, the color noise reduction all the way to 100. Okay, so with this kind of switch that you have on the left of the panel, you can turn on and off to see how the image change with the adjustments that you just did. You can do this with any other panel. Okay. Last thing we're going to do is work on the effects panel, and we're going to add a vignette to the image. The first bar that says amount is where we're going to play with. If you go to the right, the vignette is white. If you go to the left, it's dark. And that's what we want. How much you want to do it is up to you, it's personal taste. The idea of the vignette is just to attract, to draw the eyes of the viewer to the center of the image. So just like -5, I think is a good value. And here's the final image. This is how it's looking right now. Here we can compare it with the left, the before and after, and the after is on the right. Very different sky. I hope that you like this video. If you like it, please let me know. Please subscribe to the channel, and thank you very much for watching.